Hello everyone, for a little while now I've been working on a space role-playing game, a tabletop role-playing game, though maybe the rules will be adapted to a little bit more than that. And I've called it the Future Frontier RPG. It's compatible with the 5th edition rules, which are these. So this is the System Reference Document 5.2.1 that you might have been familiar with. There's the legal information that this bit has to be copied into my own document, which I'll share in the video description. And it notes that this is by Wizards of the Coast. You might be familiar with it from Dungeons and Dragons, but I think I'm not supposed to say anything about Dungeons and Dragons, so let's just set that aside. However, it's a fantasy rule set, right? So it takes a lot of adaptation. But if you're familiar with the barbarian, bard, cleric, druid, all these, what happens is in my version, they all get translated into a sci-fi class with sci-fi capabilities. Instead of spells, we have protocols, which are the equivalent. Otherwise, the front end of this, the abilities and how combat works and damage and healing, all this business is the same. And actually, in my document, I haven't copied that stuff yet, but because I have to sort of adapt it. I want to do it legitimately, in my own words, if you will. Technically, according to the rules, I can just use this provided to us free of charge, free to use the content in any manner permitted by the Creative Commons with attribution license. So, yay. But I'll put it into my own words. But you could just use this document, the 5th edition rules, as a way of getting those. That won't be true for the actual classes, which do have to change. So my document, which I'll share, is mainly dealing with those classes, though also discussing some of the skills involved. I haven't gotten to feats yet, but feats there isn't too much in here about feats anyway. I do have an equipment section that I've sort of written up as a draft, but I haven't included it in the document yet. And then there's the matter of spells. Also, I've got some spells ready, but I haven't finished that up yet. And we're not going to have magic items per se. And then monsters, which in this case would be drones, cybernetic animals, so animals that have been adapted to live other than on Earth, and stuff like that. So they'll be sci-fi-ish kind of monsters. And that will take some time, because that's actually the biggest section in here, nearly 100 pages. So let's take a look at my adaptation. So mine doesn't have as tight a print as they do. It has a little bit of an explanation up front about the basic premise of the whole thing. There's supposed to be sci-fi, and it is sort of based on the TIPA future history that I've written. So my vision of this is that it'll get bundled together with that. The TIPA future history becomes the backstory, a potential setting, if you will, for people to use if they want to. It's up to the GMs to decide that, the game masters. And then we have a classes overview for each of the classes, so I'll just go through them quickly. We have soldiers instead of fighters, anarchists instead of barbarians, smugglers instead of rogue, diplomat or spy instead of bard. I thought about making them influencers, which is another general term. So that might happen, but this covers the gist of it. Scientist instead of cleric, naturalist instead of druid, pilot instead of monk, special ops instead of paladin, engineer instead of wizard, explorer instead of ranger, cyborg instead of sorcerer, and agent instead of warlock. So the key thing about warlocks is they're under binding agreements with powerful entities. As an agent, you are also under a binding agreement with a powerful entity, except it's not a supernatural one. It's megacorporations, rogue AIs, or secret governments. So, that's the difference. So we have all of these, and it tells you, what your abilities are, hit points, and I've had to try and figure out half of these because I didn't play the 5th edition rules myself. I played older editions, so a lot of this has changed from what I was familiar with. But anyway, I've tried to adapt, and it tells you how to become a soldier, and then the soldier features and a description of those abilities. So, to be completely transparent about how I got all this stuff, the classes and skills have been discussed with my Twitch chat long ago, years ago. And I didn't get around to fleshing out this idea until now. But those had been already set up. And we had talked about exactly how these classes should be, and even the feats as well. But some of the details on this stuff, the features of the individual classes, I have discussed with AI, ChatGPT in particular. And so that helps me to balance it out a little bit, though I'm not entirely convinced that it's perfectly balanced. That'll take actual playtesting and stuff like that. But probably without the AI helping out, it would have been impossible to get this all together as it is right now. So that's just going to happen because it is a lot to deal with, and I do not have a team with me. It's just me. Yeah. If you guys would help, that'd be great. Then maybe I don't have to discuss it with non-sentient entities. So anyway, but we've got a different sort of specialization. We have this combat doctrine squad leader, and so that's just a sample combat doctrine. That is something you can pick as a soldier once you're level 3. And each of these classes does have that specialization option for you to pick from. So for anarchist, in this case, there's the path of chaos, and then you get path features. And so there's a sample path of destruction here. So if you want to go that way, again, this is the equivalent of barbarians. So destruction anarchists, but I don't go through all the different paths that will have to take an expansion. So we've got smugglers, and I could go on, but you get the picture. The whole document is 116 pages of these kinds of pages right now. They're fairly thin pages compared to the system reference document, which is double columned. I have not created any species, but I intend to. So the equivalent of races in the system reference document, the species will allow you to have aliens, basically, non-human entities roaming around, and I've already got those. I had those when I was in high school. I already have all sorts of species that are the equivalent of the races in the system reference document. That's probably the thing I did earliest. And I even, when I was a kid, drew up their worlds. So, and I put them around real star systems, and that is all done. I just have to throw it in here. I didn't prioritize it because it's easier, because it's done. Just like copying the stuff from the system reference document is the easy part. What we have here is basically the hard part, which is coming up with all of these explanations of all the different powers and stuff like that. So this is the basically difficult part done, and then the rest is going to be easier. Though, getting the lore for the species is going to be difficult, especially since they're not introduced in my future history yet. They're more in the future than the future history currently covers. It currently covers to 2100. They're beyond, I'd say, late 22nd century and beyond. So anyway, that's what we've got here. Pilot, the special ops, engineer. And then down at the end of this, we have, after agents with their augmentations, skill overview. So these are the skills. They should be familiar and what they depend on. So fairly basic skills. Piloting, of course. And that's basically it for now. So I'm going to share this so that folks can give their input, because I sorely need it. And maybe you guys can help me play test it or give suggestions for what ought to be what. And previously I had made a video on the initial bit of this document, which was just a brief description of the classes and the skills that I shared with the sustainer members on the channel. But I didn't get much feedback there, so hopefully people will be interested. I don't know. I don't know if the tabletop RPG players are as enthusiastic about sci-fi as they are about fantasy. Who knows? But that's the concept. I wanted to base it on 5th edition, even though 5th edition rules are fantasy rules, because then people are more familiar with those rules. So it'll be easier for people to pick up and find people to play with. So the compatibility works out. And that's the premise. I didn't see any space RPG based on the 5th edition rules because it takes this sort of adaptation that's somewhat potentially clunky. And it's easier to just use the RPGs that have been developed that are straight up sci-fi RPGs like the Cyberpunk or Traveler. Traveler is another one. So there are those. Anyway, so this PDF will be in the video description. There's much more to do with it, and it'll become much larger as we go along and probably end up dual columned. And right now it's a half page. The pages are 5.5 by 8.5. They'll expand to be the full 8.5 by 11 so that they'll have dual columns and be looking more like a player handbook. But anyway, this is it for now. With that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. And I'll see you next time.